All right, good morning. I'm with Ian Harris, CEO of Copper Giant. CGNT is the symbol on the TSX venture. And definitely a few news releases to delve into, including one today. But first, hey, Ian, how are you doing?
Wonderful. And I'm normally these calls are from Medellin, but today I'm in London, so a lot of excitement around, which means a little bit more traveling time.
What are you doing in London?
There's just a lot of excitement, and what's most interesting is here is some of the bigger funds in the world is just starting to see a whole lot more interest out of some of the bigger funds.
Mm,
Um, and then even, more generalist funds are starting to pay more attention to the sector. So overall, extremely exciting. And that brings me on a special trip to London just to shake some hands.
I see. Okay. So the company's been really busy in October. There's 4 news releases now, and we're only halfway through the month. I remember at some points in the past, Copper Giant may have only had 1 news release a month, but now we've got 4 and we're only halfway through. So before we get into the drilling, let's get into this consultation agreement with a First Nation group in the area. Can you tell us about that?
So, I've been saying for a long time when people ask me what are the biggest catalysts for Copper Giant, and I said we've already done them, right? It's really about getting a little bit more attention in the copper space in the equity markets in Canada. That the narrative is there, and we've kind of been delivering. But if you look at all the different, we had obviously a wonderful hell out today. But if you ask me personally, what was kind of the biggest achievement, because I have a tendency to have a longer term perspective, is this agreement with the Inga. You know that we already have an agreement in place with Montclair. You personally have seen that town and met with the people in Montclair, but the closest First Nation indigenous group is a Condagua, the Inga of Condagua. And so in a long term, if we ever do a mine, which is obviously the goal, they would be involved in that process. So we're obviously forward thinking. I like always thinking about how do you actually build a mine at this location. And so we did the previous consultation for this phase of exploration. And if you were in Canada, it would be similar to doing an exploration agreement, but it establishes an early term relationship with the community and a little bit more governance in Colombia, because it's actually, it's a legally binding agreement. And it's sponsored by the government. And we are the first in the country of Colombia to do this at the exploration phase. So for me, these are the big, I'm kind of eliminate the barriers before you ever get there. I don't want to be doing this consultation process when we're actually building a mine. You want to be establishing this relationship very early in the process. So it was, for me, it was huge. We didn't do a lot of talk about it while we were going through the process. We kind of just wanted to make sure we put out the news when we got it done.
Okay, so it seems like it outlines a vision between the company and the indigenous group, and there's going to be certain goals and objectives in 2026 and 2027. What are maybe some examples, or maybe one example of something you see the company will be able to do with this indigenous group to sort of show that this is moving forward?
So I'm going to talk about a couple things. First is that, even the government pointed out to us, and you met Thiana Alvarez, who's our VP
Yeah.
of corporate relations, who was really the face of this whole entire process. She was big on, I want to do it ourselves, right? I'm not going to bring in an outside consultant. I want to do it ourselves. And the Inga also came the same way. They said, nope, we'll do it ourselves too. We have the ability, we're early stage, we want to develop this relationship face to face. And it was actually the Ministry of Interior that said, I don't think we've ever had a case of where the company and the nation did that themselves, right? There wasn't any, third parties, consultants, or any of these experts that came in and did that relationship. And so we really focused on we got it done in record time. The amount of time it took us was a little around about a year time period. Was really focused on what are the first stages we can do to where we can build a relationship together. And some of the things, although the basic agreement or incorporation of the culture into our onboarding and some of the processes we have, sort of cleansing of drill pads before we start drilling on new drill pads, et cetera, et cetera. But we also want to build up a capacity. So we're really big on building capacity. You saw the building of the boots or the uniforms or those kind of things that we already do, was to start working on some regional exploration in our northern titles that we currently have, and actually building up from just the geochemistry and soil sampling. And that's one of our bigger goals in the year coming. Otherwise, it establishes what do we do on every stage as we go through. Right now, obviously, our goals is resource expansion, but the next will be project development and looking at the original PEA and incorporating that traditional knowledge into those processes will be huge for us. But we get to make sure that we find not an excuse to work together, but real reasons to work together. And when you look at a project development, like the incorporation of what are you doing reforestation? What kind of plants and seeds are you using? What's important to you? Those kind of things from the very beginning of the project, we're going to be, ingraining the Inga of Condagua into the development of the project.
Very good. Very good. So today, very big intercept. I mean, it's not often that I see a company report 600 plus meters of basically 0.5% copper with obviously some moly as well. So very, very big intercept from hole 51 there. And it doesn't seem, based upon the assay table, the grade is strengthening at depth. So you're getting deeper into that potassic core, and it is rich in copper and moly. So actually, the whole bottomed in 208 meters of 0.79% copper equivalent. So tell us about that.
Yeah. We've had some frustrating technical difficulties getting deep. We know one of our first holes was 1,300 meters, but a lot of them, the recent ones, have been 800. But look at this hole. It is 800 meters from the surface, averaging a 0.5 copper equivalent. It is tremendous. Other part of it, and I really want to tip my hat to Edwin, because he keeps on seeing these opportunities, this hypothesis where, and this was previously a low grade zone within the deposit area, or even the news that came out last week or 2 weeks ago, where there was an extension to the north where the model said, it could continue to go north this breccia zone. But it's also, the very exciting part is it's so high grade copper within a porphyry unit. And as you also point out, the grade is continuing to get exciting as we go deeper. So there's so much in this hole, but I'd like to see any other place that can do 800 meters from surface, averaging a 0.5 copper equivalent. It is a tremendous hole that shows the potential of this deposit.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're obviously proving substantial scale. I mean, we already knew this deposit was big, but it's a lot bigger than we previously thought. And so, like, my next question is, how big is it? And when do you look to do resource, like a new resource estimate on the project, Ian?
So we're already started the process to work on the internal calculation for updating the resource. So we are already in that beginning to relook, because I think there's an important, there's a misunderstanding. While you seem to get that this thing could be much larger, we put out the target, but some people still hear, it's 600 million tons. Yeah, it's bigger, but it's not huge. But that was an inherited resource. That was when we picked up the project from B2 Gold, and it was part of the valuation to be established on how much is this project worth. But it is no way represents the total scale of the project. And I more and I'm sorry I'm going to go sideways on you, right? You look at the age, it had a 1,000,000 year fertile period. You look at other deposits, you look at Orense, you look at Bonanza San Carlos, you look at Mirador, which obviously I'm extremely familiar with. They were all 2 to 4 million years of fertile period. And then you look, and those are the other projects that are in the Jurassic belt. And then if you look at the Miocenes, then you're looking at the projects that had the 10 million plus years are Rio Blanco. They're Chuquicamata. And these are not, even 2 million, 3 million tons of contained copper. They're 100 million tons of contained copper that have these really, really ages. So I really feel like Mocoa has the potential to be the Rio Blanco, to be the Chuquicamata of the Jurassic belt, right? It has that potential to be extremely big, and we're just looking at one part of it. So really, I want to demonstrate to market how this project can get much bigger and show big steps in the resource expansion. There's also a limit to it, right? There's that once you hit that 2 billion tons, right? There's everything else is just icing on top of the cake. It's just adding years to the end of it. So we're really looking at, when do we start doing the project development? When do we look at developing it as putting economics around the project while it's continuing to expand? So I'd really like to do this next resource estimate and get beyond the 1 billion tons as we continue to do more resource drilling. But we're already in the middle of it. We have already started that process.
So you feel confident that with the new resource, you'll be up to 1 billion tons or potentially past 1 billion tons?
Yeah. What hook or crook? What's the term? Right. So we do have an advantage that we can work on it. And one of the reasons I'm a mining engineer. I don't like taking risk. I don't like rolling the dice. I like understanding where we're sitting. So that's why we've already started the process. We already did the exploration target. We've started to build the model. I like knowing ahead of time and be able to demonstrate how we're going to grow this project. So yes, that is the goal. So the only question is, I am extremely confident that we'll be able to come up with over 1 billion tons. It is a question of how long it will take to be able to put that out. That resource estimate is the bigger question.
But that's a goal for, next year, you think?
Or or at the end of this year. Okay. It's a short-term goal.
It's a short-term goal. Okay. So there's 2 rigs going right now. What can you tell us about, expansion opportunities there, and where are those rigs at now?
So I want to say my bigger goal is to get to 3 or 4 rigs, because our bigger goal is to be able to test really some of these new targets, really demonstrate some of these bigger step outs. So right now we have 2 rigs. One is sitting on that pad that's in the Eastern Valley, and the other is the northern pad within the deposit area. But they're all really mostly focused on trying to work on the eastern extension, or getting in what we're calling the East Valley, right? The really interesting hole, even though probably one of our not least exciting results was we saw mineralization at the end of that East Valley, but it was all pointing also to the east, meaning that it was pointing that mineralization did not come from the deposit area. So it's more frustrating when you only have 2 rigs, because you need to continuously put out news flow. And we really want to get out and take these big step outs while trying to also manage the news that we're providing to market. So right now it's a comment mostly associated to the expansion to the east, and we've been very happily seen very happy results. The exception would be the result we put out about 2 weeks ago that went to the west, but definitely demonstrated how the northern breccia zone continues. And then we had the discovery on a third high grade zone. So it's one of those things when you have something that's been pumping copper into a deposit for 10 million years, you obviously have multiple phases. And we've obviously very excited when we see high grade copper in a porphyry, right? Which means it's how the copper was originally deposited without having been removed around and reconcentrated, which you normally see in a supergene, or you also see in some of these breccia zones where you have a accumulation of mineralization. So to see it in kind of a pure zone, we now kind of are getting into our formula of what are kind of the hottest and best zones of the deposit. We're still learning every single day because this is, I honestly feel that we're trying to figure out what an elephant looks like based on just touching its tail.
Mm-hmm. And then final question, Ian. Look, we had some wild moves in the copper price over the summer. Obviously, nearly touched $6 a pound in the COMEX. Then Trump changed his mind, crashed back to 450. But now, without any tariffs or too much, hoopla, the supply issues are coming to the forefront, and copper's grinding back above $5 a pound on its own fundamentals. We've got stocks like Southern Copper, huge copper miner, at multi-year highs. I think this might even be an all-time high for Southern Copper. What's your feel for the overall copper market environment right now?
Yeah, that we all need a new ticker to follow on our iPhones that is not the COMEX futures, right? So if you look, I mean, it was great when it took its run, but it was an artificial run. But if you take away that little blip that it is even in the COMEX where he's like, oh, no, it doesn't apply to refined copper. But as you say, ojo, mosca in Spanish, right? That it was only no tariff for 2 years on refined copper, which means the United States is saying, get your stuff together. Make sure you build refining and smelting capacity in the United States because you get a 2-year get out of jail free card, right? Because I don't want you saying, oh, we have to pay it on refined copper, so I'm not going to build a production chain in the United States. You're saying build your production chain in the United States, but also figure out how you're going to make refined copper. But that is not mining, that is refining, right? That's part of it. But if you look at the overall trend, it's what I love about copper. It's just one of these things that chugs away. That if you take out that little artificial blip, it is a nice continuous. The price just continues to go up and up and up and up. And it's a demonstration of that it is extremely tight. The supply demand. Where people are expecting that it will go into deficit potentially, now next year, right? And it's so tight that you have a couple disruptions. You have Grasberg having issues, and kaboom, there's spikes in price. So there's some real concerns over supply and demand, even though we have extreme short-sightedness in the overall market in commodities, because what if tariffs are meaning? What is this fight between the United States and China going to happen? There's a lot of knee-jerk reaction, but the overall long-term trend is that copper price continues to go up. And still nowhere close enough to incentivize new production, but it's getting there. So I use a term a lot with Mocoa. It's an inevitability, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so few development projects that can provide near-term production. I also believe strongly the market gets it wrong most of the time. They get excited about high-grade intercepts at depth, et cetera. You look at resolution, there's all that excitement. It's finally, but between you and I, that if resolution started to construct today, it'd be 7 years before you see production because it's so deep, right? Nobody has built a new mine in Argentina, right? And who's going to build one on the border of Argentina and Chile, where Mocoa Colombia is a major non-NATO ally of the United States. So it's long-term over the last 20 years has built a relationship equivalent to Japan and Australia. We have new elections coming up in May. Going to see a new president in August. The relationship says, this is my, it's, what is the term? Not friend zoning, but friend shoring.
French shore. Yeah.
French shore.
We're not going to friend zone Colombia.
We're going to friend shore, right? Friend shore production because you want smelting and refining capacity. It's near surface. The last hole just proved it. 800 meters from surface, averaging 0.5 equivalent copper, right? It's near infrastructure. There's two 220 kV power lines that run by the project. There's a town that is nearby that provides skilled labor, but nobody lives in the deposit area. You have a road. You're 45 minutes from a airport. You have access to water. You have a port 400 kilometers away that includes bulk export on the Pacific coast. All of it aligns to this will be one of the future copper mines on the planet that will help us solve this problems, and market will wake up to that. So obviously, I'm extremely excited that it's going to continue. And I said it many times. We've hit the catalysts, we've proved it, and we didn't even talk about the metallurgy of the project that we also put a big news release out showing the early.
There's so many news releases.
I know, so much stuff, but it was about all this project needs really is to provide a little bit of momentum to go from a proper valuation, which our peers are trading at least at a penny per pound in the ground. And we're still at that 0.2 cents per pound in the ground, elite. And so it's just about momentum. I think we've hit so many catalysts, good drill results, good metallurgy, good social license, and I think that market's going to wake up and understand what we've seen for a long time.
The market is starting to wake up. And, let me just point out something here and also give you one more question here. So it feels like Copper Giant is one of those situations where it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then all of a sudden, everything changes and it matters a lot. And something happened in mid-September. Maybe you can tell me what it was, but something changed in the character of how the share price was trading. I mean, obviously the sector has done well the last month, but Copper Giant is more than a double just since mid-September. What changed?
It's been a market issue. It hasn't been a catalyst issue. We put out drill hole results out today, and for the first time ever on news, it wasn't a liquidity event. It was a good news event, meaning that we've chewed through a lot of paper. I mean, we have to be honest and do a little. We had to do a big financing. It carried a paper. There was a lot of people that sold their share and held their warrant. But we've chewed through that, and it's an advantage of we've had strong volume. And so now we've established a new base. We've continued to put out the same news. We've continued to put out demonstrating how this project is getting better. And I think it's all just kind of all come together. I think most people say, this is so undervalued. It's a common comment with Copper Giant. It's so undervalued. But then there's some justification mentally of why it's undervalued. But my opinion has been we still haven't seen the momentum yet in copper, and we're starting to see it. So all the stars are kind of aligning. We put out strong news. We continue to demonstrate how this project is advancing. And at the same time, we're seeing a little bit of love in copper. We saw it start with gold, then it's moving a little bit to silver, but it was just jumping from one commodity to the next. But now we're seeing new money into the space, and copper is obviously a big, big market. And so I think it's finally getting the love that it deserves. It's had the narrative for a very long time. But now it's finally getting the love in an equity space. And Copper Giant, I feel like a kid at the candy store. My face is stuck against the glass and kind of first in line. And so when this market moves, and as it moves, it gets the love first because it's such a quality project. And it has so many things going from it, from a potential to actually be built and become a future mine.
Thank you, Ian. Enjoy London, and hopefully you shake the right hands.
I'm working on it.